to everyone present here. I, Chris Nelson, along with
Namrata Prince,
are thrilled to be up here as your MCs for today's event. Commencing the beginning of this enlightening panel discussion on Panoptic view of digital payments through an ethical lens.
we would like to extend a hearty welcome to our panelists, Mr. Adhikar Naidu, economist, Mr. Sharad Kapoor, finance coach, Kapoor School, Mr. Prahlad R, chartered accountant, Mr. Mustafa Bedawal, product manager at an S&P 500, Mr. Akash, editor-in-chief of Doodwala, a crypto newsletter, our moderator, Mr. Uday Keti, director EY, Dr. Tomy K. Kallarakkal, Dean of School of Commerce, Finance and Accountancy, Dr. Biju, director, School of Commerce, Finance and Accountancy, Dr. Karthigai Prakasam, head of Department of Commerce, all the faculty members, members of the IMA Christ Student Chapter Bangalore, and students of this event. A hearty welcome once again. Before we move ahead with this event, I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce the IMA Christ Student Chapter and its workings to you all. The mission of this chapter is to provide a forum for research, practice, development, education, knowledge sharing, and the advocacy of the highest ethical and best business practices in management, accountancy, and finance.
The chapter, chartered in the year 2020, and works under the guidance of the IMA Bangalore parent chapter. It aims to create a strong professional network of CMA aspirants. We are a community dedicated to connecting accounting, finance, and business students on college campuses. The chapter engages in various activities, including spreading the word about IMA on campus, helping students make career decisions, sponsoring talks and discussions with established business personalities, and more.
Our first event took place in January in the year of 2021, as a webinar on business transformations, where we were honored to have Mr. J. Stephen McNally, the chair of IMA's Global Board of Directors for the year 2021-2022. Since then, there have been a plethora of events conducted by the chapter, such as webinars, workshops, and numerous other activities.
More recently, the chapter conducted a debate competition and a stock trading competition in April to May, to which there was an overwhelming positive feedback. Our aim is for everyone to take something of value from each of the chapter's endeavors.
Now, let's take a sneak peek into the IMA Christ Student Chapter through the medium of media.
A round of applause as they accompany us on the dais.
Maybe an hour is not sufficient, but we'll try and see how we can decipher some of the nuances of the topics in hand. Let me just start with Mr. Prahlad, if I can ask you. Digital payments as a concept is something that most of us here in this audience are familiar when we go to a grocery shop, when we make payments through mobiles. Could you just give us a little bit of a background in terms of the evolution of the transaction and the payment cycle? And what is this digital payment that we currently know of? Is that something different from what has been happening over the past several years?
Thanks, Sunil. Hello.
Yeah, it's audible.
It's audible, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Hey, good morning all. And like Uday just mentioned, this topic of digital payments, I mean, 1 hour is actually, I mean, you have shrunk a lot, so that is fine. I mean, what I will do is, I'm like Uday said, I will give you a history of it. Like in any typical movie, right, it starts with some kind of a flashbacks or some intro. So we will just go into the 70s, 80s and the 90s. Before the digital, I mean, anything digital started hitting our payment systems. So what used to happen was when we present a check, what happens, there always used to be something or is a check, it's there even today, right? I write a check, give it to you, you will then go and present it to your banker. Then the banker physically will take the check to the clearing house of his head office. For example, you give a check to, you present a check to Indian Bank. So it goes to Indian Bank's regional office or their clearing office within Bangalore. And the clearing office consolidates all that check and then it takes to RBI's clearing house. So then what happens is at RBI, so assuming I have an account with say State Bank of India. So a State Bank of India representative would have physically come there. He will pick the check and he will then come back to the branch, check if my account has balance and then say there is a balance. Then he will clear the check and then it goes, then the information is passed on. It goes back to the clearing house at RBI and from there it goes to your Indian Bank branch. The whole process, right, if you look at it, was taking, earlier it used to take like 5 days, then it came down to 3 days. So 3 days was pretty normal. Then the first evolution in this process came in the form of high value transactions. So any check above the value of 1 lakh used to get cleared in 1 day. First step in automation. The second step that happened was real-time gross settlement, which is that RTGS, that it's still there. So RTGS was one of the first electronic transfers. Then the next thing was the NEFT. The third thing that really changed the Indian payment landscape was immediate payment settlement scheme, which is that IMPS that we know of today. IMPS was instant. It was actually instant. The first time in Indian context, an instant transfer started happening was through IMPS. But in this whole chain, if you look at it, what never changed was the clearing house as a concept. There always used to be one clearing house. So if I send money from my SBI to your Indian Bank or whatever account, it always passes through a clearing house. That clearing house relays the message. I mean, there will be some technical terms of it and we will not go into that. But there always used to be a clearing house. Then the biggest revolution in terms of banking or the payment was UPI. UPI actually, IMPS had its own limitations. Everything had its own limitation. UPI was the first thing that actually revolutionized the entire payment system in the country. And UPI's growth was actually bolstered by COVID. COVID literally accelerated the adoption of UPI across the country. If you look at the RTGS or NEFT or even IMPS was mainly used at the business or predominantly the formal economy, not the informal economy. UPI brought that informal economy into the mainstream. The formalization of economy started happening. Cash was actually the emperor in India. It slowly was relegated as a king. Today cash is the king, it's still the king. But UPI actually revolutionized the entire formalization of our economy. By formalization, I mean bringing the economy into the mainstream. That is the biggest achievement of UPI. Then now what we are looking at is the digital payment, for which, I mean, we are now discussing on all this, it's a digital payment. So what is really the difference between an UPI, a transaction effected through an UPI, and this digital payment that we are talking about?
Maybe Prahlad, we can come to that a little later. The first stance will be the physical form of cash or the checks that you refer to versus what is UPI. Any difference between the two?
There actually is nothing, because this money, the electronic money that we are talking of, is still a cash. I can convert that into a physical cash at any point in time.
Right.
Whereas a digital currency, that what is being proposed.
No, in terms of the old banking clearing house, you send a check, it goes to some clearing house, it gets cleared and then comes back. Is the same process still
It's
in the
actually
UPI?
the same process, but it's all done electronically. Today, the two servers communicate with each other. When I press my pay button using my smartphone or whatever, it still goes to a clearing house, and from there, I mean, messages getting transmitted. The whole thing is actually done in an anonymous manner.
Right. So I guess the digital payment as a concept is not new. It's something that all of us are familiar with. Most of us use it on a day-to-day basis, be it to pay to the cab drivers to a grocery. We use a smartphone, but effectively what happens is there's a transaction between two banks, but the smartphone is the medium to transact between the two banks. Right? Right. Maybe, Sharad, if I can just bring you in and give us some perspective about the regulators in place. And is it going to be any different from what is the usual banking clearing house to versus the UPI? I know the RBI came up with some thought process around charging some fee around the payment structure through UPIs. Any background around that could help for the larger audience to understand a little more?
The RBI published a paper saying that the UPI as it stands today has not rewarded the banks and the infrastructure companies that have enabled the payments infrastructure to be what it is today. And they have proposed that a fee be charged on UPI payments. This prompted a very fierce reaction from the government, wherein the government came out and said that we don't have any intention of ever introducing charges for UPI. It's going to be free. It is free now. It's going to remain free. And we want to convert the economy into a less cashless economy where digital payments are far higher than cash payments. They want to eliminate cash. Now, eliminating cash is not going to happen 100%, but all governments across the world want to eliminate it as much as possible. It costs a lot of money to ensure their safe security, there's their passage all across the country from the central bank to the banks, and then from the banks to the ATMs, etc. Now, it also has other socio-economic goals, which are to a cashless economy or more of a digital economy definitely gives a fillip to tax efficiency, tax collection, enables the government to prevent illicit transactions from taking place, because when you have a paper trail, people are more scared of doing the wrong things with that money. And even if they do, detection, prevention, and prosecution becomes a lot easier. Not to mention tax efficiency, tax collection, and the robustness of the tax system. If you charge for UPI, now, in my perspective, if you charge for UPI payments, if you charge for these peer-to-peer payments, you're going to set the clock back to pre-2016. I think 2016, the demonetization event was the fillip that gave all these digital payments a big boost. And that's when you see the curve really going up. If you charge a fee, however small, whether it's 0.5%, 0.25%, you are going to discourage it. You are not going to have what you have today, which is every Kirana store having a QR code outside it. People are going to not want you to pay them by cash. Because I think you already see it in today's day. Now, even though we don't have fees for UPI payments now, I think all of you would have experienced the Uber drivers calling you and saying, are you going to pay me by Paytm or cash, right? And the only reason they have a problem with it is because their payment gets delayed if you pay them by an electronic form. They don't have to pay a fee to collect your electronic payment, but they have to wait a little while. Add on a fee on top of that, and you're going to have even Kirana stores and this parking fees, etc. You're not going to be able to pay these charges in electronic forms. So I definitely feel that the government needs to find a common ground, a middle ground with the banks. Also taking into consideration how much money that they're saving without cash. Now, I think the banks are being a little unfair by not talking about the amount of money that they're saving by not having to deal with cash, because cash is expensive to transact in, to hold, to secure, to store, etc. So they're going to have to find some common ground wherein they say, okay, I would propose this, yeah. If you're really going to charge for these payments, if you really have to charge for these payments, I would say charge for large value transactions only, let's say above 5,000 or above 10,000. Do not charge for the 20 rupees coffee payment, 10 rupees coffee, because that's going to kill the system. So I would say find a middle ground. One, to conclude, find a middle ground. Also, try to wake the banks up as far as the money that they're saving on cash transactions and cash storage and processing. Charge only for high value transactions, which anyway are going to take place through electronic means. Nobody's going to come and pay you 1 lakh in cash. That doesn't happen nowadays. So if I have to pay someone 1 lakh or 75,000 or 50,000, I'm going to do it by UPI, whether or not you charge me. But don't charge for lower value transactions, because that's easily going to be substitutable to cash. Yeah,
well said. I think maybe with a show of hands, how many of you carry cash with you every day? Cash? Okay, I'm the only person who doesn't carry cash then. I just use my mobile phone, so maybe you guys haven't come to the contours of digital payments yet, and maybe this session could help you why you need to come to electronic form of payments. Maybe the next topic or the larger umbrella could probably interest you. Maybe you have more of cryptocurrencies with you rather than electronic payments. So let's maybe bring in Akash. I think if you can just give us a perspective of where does crypto stand in the entire digital payment ecosystem? It has evolved over a period of time. There are many private players in decentralized form. But what's been the evolution that you can probably give an insight in terms of cryptos? That would be helpful for the larger audience, if you can say so.
Sure. Before that, just show of hands, how many of you have transacted using cryptocurrencies on an exchange or any other medium? It's about like 1%, 2%, a few people here. And in the larger realm, through the view of digital payments, I think crypto will be a huge player, because crypto started as primarily a payments medium, a medium of exchange with the advent of Bitcoin. And it would be useful to just define how crypto works from a payment mechanism before we move on to, say, comparing it to either UPI or the larger concept of, say, CBDCs. The main motive of creating a crypto, creating specifically Bitcoin, which is the largest crypto out there, 40% of the market roughly, is the need to skip the middleman. Now, my panelists here have very adequately broken down the foundation and how cash was settled and how earlier means of payment had several middlemen. With Bitcoin and other larger cryptocurrencies, the goal is ideally to skip the middleman and create peer-to-peer networks. A network where I can directly transact with anybody on this panel, anyone in the audience, without the need for having either a bank in the middle or having a centralized currency like the rupee or the dollar controlled by a central bank. And the way that works is the way any other payment mechanism via a bank works, which is in the form of a dual ledger entry, both in my ledger as well as in the traditional sense, the bank's ledger, using a fiat currency like the rupee or the dollar. The only difference being, in this case, it would be recorded in something called a distributed ledger, which is a fancy way of saying the blockchain. And all the transactions would therefore be chained together, it would be unmodifiable, etc.
Bank now brings about a currency of its own, which could probably be on similar platform or of a different mechanics. But probably we'll ask Mr. Mustafa to kind of give us a glimpse of what the central bank in India is proposing to do so when they introduce their own digital currency, the e-digital or rupee digital that we can talk about. The very concept of it, And the purpose of bringing it, when we are so successfully using UPIs, do we really need a digital currency? If you could just throw some light around that, that will be helpful.
Sure. So I think we now have a good background of what is the history of money, what are the regulators across the global and how they are impacting the flow of money between cross-border and between domestic as well. And then we have some of the background of what is crypto. Now let's jump in to understand what is a different form of money. So we can emphasize a lot more of what is happening across the globe in terms of CBDC adoption. But right now I need to make a clear distinction between the different form of money. So first you have cryptocurrencies. So cryptocurrencies in the form of CBDC is Bitcoin, Ethereum, Dogecoin, and n number of other crypto that you may have heard of. But we need to understand who is behind this particular motive of issuing a private form of money. The second form of money is stable coin. So what do we mean by stable coin is you deposit some kind of fiat money in the bank account, and bank account will give a stability to form a different kind of money on blockchain, maybe on Ethereum or directly on Bitcoin blockchain itself. So it's known as USDC or USDT. Like there are multiple kind of form of stable coin right now in the ecosystem, but you need to understand the concept of who is behind that particular stable coin. So private entity is behind issuing those stable coins. The third is CBDCs. So I think we need to understand where the CBDC form of information or maybe the content sharing started. So it started in 2019 when Libra, Facebook entity come into picture, and they said that we will prepare or we will give some guidance for issuing this kind of stable coin or form of CBDC across the globe. And CBDC will be having a huge impact if Facebook were in charge in 2019 because of its entire mass audience of social media like Instagram and Facebook. And that's where various central banks across the globe started to research what are the form of different kind of CBDC in picture. And fourth category is we use in our day-to-day life, like fiat money and cash. So I think you all are holding cash, so meaning cash is king, but we need to understand what is a thin line difference between the issuer of CBDC and fiat, or i.e. cash. So cash is a form of money that is issued on M2 level, meaning central bank issue money to the people. Now it's the right of central bank to take back those kind of money. So you have FDIC insurance across US and European region, but India you have some kind of SEBI regulation as well to give those kind of monetary value when banks goes bankrupt. But in case of CBDC, it's a sovereign money. So what do we mean by sovereign money is the behind, who are the people behind those kind of money? So RBI in case of India context and US or Federal Reserve in case of US context is the issuer of those money. Now here the bankruptcy part comes into picture. Like if commercial banks goes bankrupt, then CBDC would be a liability of central bank. So it will create a more kind of user confirmed across the user spectrum of entire nation to have a confidence on one of the form of money. So come back to CBDC. So there are different kind of CBDC like wholesale CBDC, retail CBDC, and synthetic CBDC. So retail CBDC is a form of two-tier CBDC. So central bank will issue some kind of a value in the form of ledger. So the commercial bank, and commercial bank via its legal tender will issue some form of money to the retail user. But the major adoption in the ecosystem where the payment is very much saturated, meaning the people understand how to transact money, how to use different form of money. In that context, in various Western countries, or maybe specifically, I am very sure about India as well, because we know how to transact money via UPI. So in that particular context, you have a wholesale CBDC, meaning people will not be having a right to transact this form of money. The backend will take care of every structuring kind of layer that right now we are seeing on the UPI level, like NPCI is a backend of UPI, the same way commercial bank would be the backing wholesale money of CBDC layer. So that's a clear distinction of what is happening in the entire structure of CBDC and maybe a broader context of payment ecosystem globally.
Right. So effectively, we're looking at currency as the legal tender, and that's going to be replaced by a digital currency as a legal tender. Is that the right way to conclude it? In an electronic form.
Yes. So I think, like the clear distinction is the electronic money right now you can see on your bank account is issued via fractional reserve lending. So commercial bank also have some kind of account with RBI. You have heard a term of repo rate, reverse repo rate, and those kind of concept, I'm sure. But the thing is, they issued 10 times more than the account or maybe the balance they hold with RBI, meaning the central bank. But in case of CBDC, it's a liability of central bank, directly M0 money. So M0 is a layer of reserve bank like RBI. M1 is a layer of commercial bank like SBI, SDFC, and other form of banks. And third layer, which is M3, is a form of cash. So here we are talking about the CBDC, who is behind that particular currency. So who is the entity behind that particular currency is directly a reserve bank. Now just make a distinction between if you can rely on SDFC or if you are comfortable to rely on RBI. I'm sure 100 out of 100 will say that we will rely more on RBI, which is central bank. So that's a powerful message that central banks is giving, meaning for the financial inclusion, but there are other aspects of as well, like the privacy and as well as, the different kind of, programmability concept as well. So that's a fear across the citizen, but CBDC inevitable because it will create a large impact on cross-border market as well, because there is a pain that government and institutions are right now seeing in the market. Like just go to the Western Union branch and see that how much fees you are paying from one country to another. It's approximately on an average around 7 to 8%. And in Asia, it may go up to 18 to 19%. So that's a harsh reality, but there is an outcome that we are seeing right now globally, I think, in the form of different kind of currencies.
Right. Right. So maybe if I can bring in Adhikari here, and if you could, while we know that the Reserve Bank is currently proposed, or rather come out with some pilot scheme for both wholesale and expected to look at retail as an alternative to digital currency. The world over, in terms of other central banks, if we look at, I think, Bahamas to Sweden to many other countries are looking at, even the European Central Bank is looking at a digital currency. Our neighbor, Pakistan, is looking at a digital currency. What's been is there a success factor that we can look at? And are we looking at the best practice? Could you just throw a bit of perspective around that?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Uday. And I was just speaking to the student team who was organizing this, and I said, after a really long time, I'm coming for a 9 a.m. session at Christ. The last time I did was probably when I was studying, and the best feeling today was I need not worry about the 85% attendance. So that's a good feeling. But, I think it feels great to be back. And, coming back to your point, Uday, is, the whole concept of CBDC, right? And why are we really talking about it today is, with why CBDCs really have come into the picture is, with the advent of cryptocurrencies in the last decade or so, there's a sort of parallel economy which has started, right? A private economy where a lot of central banks maybe cannot control it, right? Because let's say if I'm transacting with my friend in crypto, technically there's no sort of, ledger or system where a central bank can see what I am doing. So they are a bit worried that, okay, if there's a private economy coming in, what's the point of me actually being the central banker to a country? And that is when the whole concept of CBDC came to the picture across different countries. more so in some of the smaller ones, because the path to adoption is much faster there, right? Like if you have to implement a CBDC in India, we have a population of 1 billion plus, it's going to take a while. But if you look at some of the smaller countries like Bahamas, El Salvador, and some of these other ones, the population is quite low, so you can adapt some of these newer technologies. And, touching upon a few use cases, right? Like why CBDCs, why exactly, what's happening around the world, I think the whole concept of monetary policy. So today, if you see central banks across the world, if you are aware, are on this urgency, sense of urgency to hike interest rates. Why is that? And I personally was never a fan of, expansive balance sheets by central banks, because inflation is always going to come and bite you. And that's what's happening today, right? Like if you look at US, UK, India, for that matter, is also very much in an inflationary environment, but you have a lot of these issues coming into the picture. So imagine a scenario where central banks can actually use the whole concept of CBDC to control their monetary policy. Like everyone, I mean, all of you guys would be learning right now, is the whole concept of what a central bank does is maintaining orderly economic conditions, price pressures being low and stuff like that. And if you look at the power of CBDC, just imagine how much it can drive in terms of, the concepts such as financial inclusion. Let's say the most needy of the economy, such as the lowest strata of the population, need certain benefits. Today you have direct benefit transfers. A lot of that happens via, let's say, UPI, bank transfers, etc. But imagine a scenario where, let's say, you're getting a subsidy for an LPG cylinder, right? And today, it is difficult to track if I'm paying a person who needs a subsidy 10,000 rupees per month. It is difficult to track where he or she is ending up spending that amount. But imagine a scenario where a CBDC is coined specifically for transferring some of these benefits for LPG subsidy, where you can use that CBDC only at LPG outlets. Makes sense, right? Because then the benefits are exactly going to the resources in the economy which need the most. And apart from that, it's really about maintaining a lot of these aspects of I'll just quickly touch upon wholesale versus retail. Wholesale is more of commercial banks utilizing CBDCs for settlements between themselves. Again, I'm not going to get too much into the details. We can go on forever, but it's about really focusing on speed and scale, right? That's why I always believe CBDCs are focusing on two things: speed and scale. The speed at which transactions get settled almost instantly, and scale, right? You can actually look at billions of dollars being transacted in a few moments, which is difficult today, in spite of all the advancements in. So I'll just give you an example, right? Like I'm primarily based out of UK, and if you look at it, in India, we have IMPS, NEFT, which is amazing. I'll tell you why, because it's almost instant. IMPS is instant up to, let's say, 5 lakhs now, and NEFT takes 2 hours. But if you look at in the UK, a lot of times if you have to send across large money transfers, it takes almost a day. Could you imagine a developed country like UK having to spend 24 hours for money to go from one party to the other? That's exactly where CBDC comes in, right? Where you do it instantly. And more so, I think it's also about, the whole concept of, the likes of universal basic income, which a lot of these countries talk about today, is imagine, let's say, giving 100 digital rupees or 1,000 digital rupees per week to the most needy, right? Where it goes exactly where it needs to. And a lot of countries have started piloting some of these schemes. And as I said, I think it really depends on the mindset of the policymakers and the sort of scale of the country. And I always keep going back, because India is a vast machine in itself. So to sort of, integrate something like a CBDC is going to take time. That's what RBI has started, as you rightly pointed out. And the fact that there are many use cases, such as, let's say, even in MSME lending, right? Like if you're looking at small businesses getting support from governments, CBDC can be used as a tool to actually focus on what sectors to prioritize. Let's say if it's agriculture, if it's manufacturing, focus on those areas, cater the amount take it exactly where it comes, because today, the whole concept of a digital currency I wouldn't use the word crypto, but it's more, CBDC is more fiat backed or central bank backed, so it's more acceptable by policymakers across the world as well, is it really wants to bring in a change in the way people transact. That's really what the objective is of any CBDC. And the fact that you're able to cut down middlemen, and the whole concept of blockchain is decentralization, where not me, not you, not anybody here has the control to change one transaction. And that's really what, the whole point of CBDC is you're able to fairly distribute resources. When I say resources, it's monetary resources, to the required stakeholders in the economy without actually worrying that there are going to be leakages or, issues arising in terms of, let's say, lack of utilization, etc. So, just to wrap up, to summarize, there are really strong use cases in terms of CBDC, both on the business side of things, on the retail side of things. Let's say you and me transacting, there are a lot of, use cases as well. And I think it's the future. The adoption will take time, but it's about making the steps in the right direction, which I think a lot of these central banks across different countries, Singapore, India, Bahamas, even a lot of digital euro is something which is coming up in the euro area. And I think it's really going to take off once we start seeing the mainstream adoption kicking in. Yeah.
Right. I think India as a country can be itself a use case for the rest of the world to follow, right? I guess that's where the population strength comes in. So maybe Sharad, if you can just, from a layman's standpoint,
From a layman's standpoint, I'll tell you where CBDCs are. Okay, I'm going to make this short, but I'm going to divide my points into 5. 1, CBDCs, central bank digital currencies, in my opinion, is going to be the aha moment where cryptocurrencies actually gain mainstream adoption. Now, let me explain what I mean by this. If you look at the percentage or the proportion of people who actually believe in cryptocurrency, it is not very high. A lot of people have heard about cryptocurrencies. There's a lot of distrust around the ecosystem. Paradoxically, cryptocurrencies are, the very idea is very antithetical to what is going on right now. If you were a real believer in cryptocurrencies, you would not be placing your trust in an exchange to keep your money, etc. You would be transacting with the cryptocurrencies yourselves, and you would be storing the cryptocurrency yourself. You would not be leaving it on an exchange. But anyway, we have there's a lot of distrust towards the crypto ecosystem because it's not regulated. There've been a lot of scams. A lot of people have lost their money. A lot of people have been duped, etc. Now, as I was saying, there's a very small proportion of the population that actually believes in the future of cryptocurrencies. Most people think of it as some mixture of an unregulated shadow economy. Some people think of it as an outright scam or a Ponzi scheme. Even financially literate people, there is a very small proportion of people who actually believe in it. Now, when you have the central bank of a country, when you have your own government coming out and saying, I have a digital currency and I want you to use this, that's when people are going to sit up and take note of the concept of a digital currency. Then the second step in that natural evolution process, now this is just my theory, of course, the second step in that natural evolution process is going to spell the death knell of money and state. So in the preceding century, we saw a separation between religion and state. I believe we're going to have a separation between money and state, because the second step in this process, in this evolutionary process, is where people think to themselves, okay, so digital currencies are a thing now. I think, now that the RBI has come out with this, now that the government has come out with their own digital currencies, I don't think I have any doubt about digital currency being the future. Okay, I'm thinking from the perspective of a future person. The next question that's going to come into the mind of a financially astute investor is going to be, do I want to hold a digital currency issued by a government, or do I want to hold a digital currency issued by a borderless, decentralized entity? Now, I'll tell you the distinction between these two. Something like Bitcoin or Bitcoin Cash is decentralized. cannot be shut down, cannot be seized, cannot be influenced in any way. There's a fixed supply, there's a fixed issuance schedule. You know exactly where you are in the hierarchy. You know that nobody can come and seize your money tomorrow. You know you can take your money where you want to go. If you want to cross, if there's social strife or political strife in India, you just need to memorize 24 words and you can cross the border with $1 billion. Nobody at the border can stop you from taking your money anywhere. All right? Your choice is between a currency like that and a central bank digital currency wherein any time somebody sitting in Mumbai or New Delhi can turn your money off and on. They can tell you whether you are rich or poor by the click of a button. They can program where you can spend your money and where you cannot spend your money. They can track each and every transaction of yours. They can also tell you that your money, if not spent by so-and-so date, will expire, will not exist anymore. So then you kind of, so the thought process in your head would be, do I want to own my money or do I want another entity telling me what my money is, what it can be spent on and when it will expire? Okay, so that's one. Cryptocurrency, so that's when that's when investors will start taking cryptocurrency seriously, and that's when I think people are going to have that's going to be a large scale shift towards decentralized currencies which function according to a code and an algorithm instead of someone who can just flip a switch on and say, okay, print $100 billion. If you looked at what's going on, I'll just take 1 minute to digress.
If I may just put this way that, you're looking at something like tomorrow the government cannot come and say 500 rupee note, 2000 rupee note is going to be banned.
That was actually quite a benign event. Because the government said that 500 rupee and 1000 rupee notes are banned, you can go and exchange them for new notes. I'm talking, that's one of course. I'm talking about something much more serious. Now I was reading this article in the New York Times about day before yesterday in preparation for this, and there was this Venezuelan person who was a lawyer in Venezuela, and he was a very successful lawyer, but because of the economic collapse over there, he became dirt poor. And he wrote an article about how Bitcoin saved his life. And how Bitcoin saved his family's wealth, because he converted his bolivars into Bitcoin, and he said that nobody can stop me from leaving the country, nobody can stop me from exiting the country with my money is safe, the government cannot influence my money, the government cannot influence how wealthy or how poor I am. So anyway, what I was saying was, if you looked at what has been going on since March 2020, I think the entire world of capitalism has been turned upside down. What has been going on since 2020 is an absolute insult to capitalism. Now, I'm not, you guys should go and follow these meme pages on Instagram, these finance meme pages, because they're real, because they, in the format of a joke, they actually portray what the world has become. So Jerome Powell can just say print and the money gets created out of thin air, all right? So this is something that is liked by the US. This was something that was liked by the public in the US because they got 3 stimulus checks. I'm not sure of the exact amounts. I think it's $1,200, $1,500, and then $600. Everyone likes free money. What you don't realize is when you print even one additional dollar, you're making all the existing holders of dollars poorer. If there's only 100 ounces of gold in the world and people own that 100 ounces, if I go and put 100 more ounces of gold, then that 200 ounces of gold is still the same. So what I'm going to say is, if you increase the supply of money, every holder of each unit of your money is poorer. That's exactly what's going on when governments decide to print money out of thin air. And they can print CBDCs also out of thin air. So you have 1,000 e-rupees in your account that can be worthless tomorrow, just like how your money is consistently worth less and less as you keep it with you and don't spend it or don't invest it in something more productive.
Right.
Now, the most interesting thing for me would not be governments issuing CBDCs and what we call de-dollarization. These are not things that are going to be interesting. The most interesting developments in the future, according to me, are people saying, look, I have 2 choices. I can hold money that is decentralized and that nobody controls or everybody controls, or I can hold money that someone in Mumbai or New Delhi or New York controls and can anytime be turned off and on, anytime can be printed, anytime can be taken back, all right? So just out of curiosity, how many of you let's say you had some money, okay? Sorry for the morbid example, but let's say you had some money. Let's say you had 1 crore of rupees and you were convicted of a crime and you were going to go to jail for 10 years. And the judge told you that I'll give you 1 week to sort your financial affairs in order, and then in you go and then you don't come out. So no mobile phones, no meeting your family, nothing. Just go in, come out after 10 years. How many of you, now if you were given 2 choices, how many of you would be willing to put your money in a hard money asset like gold, silver, platinum, Bitcoin Cash, Monero? Okay, that's one choice. Okay, either one of these hard money, fixed supply, fixed issuance, hard money alternatives, or keep your money in a fixed deposit in State Bank of India, Canara Bank, where your capital is of course safe, but you don't know what the money is going to be worth later on. How many of you would put it in hard money, and how many of you would put it in fiat money? How many of you would put it in hard money like gold, silver, or Bitcoin for 10 years and then come out? Okay, can't do anything in that meanwhile. Okay, thank you for that. Now, how many of you would be willing to put it in a deposit in State Bank of India and come back after 10 years? Now, there you go. I don't think I think only one person said, I would like to do that. The simple reason is that you would like something that cannot be influenced by human beings. Okay, and I'll just take 1 more minute to tell you why you should never ever trust the government or any central entity with your money. The central bank independence, first of all, is a myth. Central bank independence is a fair weather phenomenon. It happens only during good times. During good times, when the party is going and everyone's happy, that's when you have people saying the central bank is independent, there are provisions in the law regarding the separation of powers of the RBI and the government, etc. Because if you look at World War I and World War II, central banks were basically just taken down and the government took over. And even during the pandemic, the government wanted certain social support programs to go out. They issued bonds. Those bonds were not bought by the public. They were bought by the central bank with newly printed money. All right? So what I'm trying to say is, now the overarching rule of success in personal finance is your ability to delay your gratification, your patience, and your ability to think long term. Politicians and central bankers who are in the seat when they are in power never ever think about the long term. They think of their term in power. They want to remain popular. They want to do what is good for them, which is why you see every single fiat currency, not even every single fiat currency has been devalued, debased, and has eventually died. That is going to happen with the Indian rupee. That's going to happen with the US dollar. It's only a matter of time. You look at the strongest empires in the world, the Roman Empire, etc. You look at the strongest empires in the world, as the empires decline, as they have problems like famine, pandemics, etc., they print money, they debase money, and finally the money dies. That doesn't happen with hard money. You could, in 1920, with 1 ounce of gold, you could go to New York, spend 1 night in the Plaza Hotel. You could watch a movie on Broadway, and you could treat yourself to a steak dinner, and you could do the exact same thing today with 1 ounce of gold. You can't say the same thing of any fiat currency. $100 will not get you what $100 got you 100 years back. Okay? So what I'm going to say is, CBDCs will be the death knell of money and state. A hard money currency. Sorry we're taking so much time.
No, that's fine. I mean, I'm sure you have a perspective around it, which the audience seems to be liking it. But I suppose it's for the choice for the audience, for the public at large to look at the alternatives. And maybe if Mr. Mustafa, if you could, there is scope for existence of every form of currency. And I don't see a reason why it should be left to the choice of for the public at large to choose from. A security-based, a central bank secured digital currency seems to be a better alternative versus what Sharad just alluded to in terms of the hegemony that some of the central banks currently hold. And is therefore crypto here to stay? Or, I think if the world over looks at digital currency, is crypto really here to stay, or is something that's the end of it?
All right, so a great question, first of all. So I would like to add many points to my fellow panelist Sharad. So he has mentioned a good point on overview of how the spectrum of digital currencies and hard money and everything looks like. But we need to understand from a logical perspective. So, I don't know if you guys have heard about dollar milkshake theory. So we need to understand where the dollar value derived from. So after the Bretton Woods agreement in 1971, the central bank was not holding one-on-one ratio of gold to fiat issuance. Right now, the system is known as fractional reserve lending that I have earlier said. But what do you mean by dollar milkshake theory is every dollar that is printed by the Federal Reserve would be having a direct impact on US citizens and indirect impact on other citizens. Why is the case? Because every other reserve banks hold dollar in their balance sheet. So in their balance sheet, 95% comprises of the foreign asset like dollar and euro, and some few percentage like 3% and 5% comprises of hard money, which is gold. The logical argument lies here, is the effect of issuance by Federal Reserve has an equal opportunity on every citizen? I don't think so. So it is known as a phenomenon of canonical effect. So the person or institution who are sitting right after the Federal Reserve issuance will be benefited more than the retail participants. And that's where the concept of Bitcoin and hard money and those kind of concept comes in. But also the other spectrum of the argument lies in demand and supply. So dollar derives its value from the people who pay taxes in dollar. The other form of demand derived from the petrodollar concept. So what do you mean by petrodollar? People pay dollar in terms of exchange of those barrels of oils between the countries. So you cannot transact with euro or Indian rupees while purchasing oil from other external countries. You need to pay in dollar. That's why Central Reserve hold dollars. So that's where the demand from dollar comes in. And third is from foreign exchanges. So if people wants to do a bilateral trade agreement, let's say India need to do bilateral trade agreement with China or Russia or any other country, they need to pay dollar. So that's where the demand is coming from. And that's where the theory of dollar milkshake theory comes in, where the people who are more in front of issuance will be benefited more, like corporates and high net worth individuals, but not a day-to-day life of retail individuals. Now, coming to the hard money kind of concept. So, Bitcoin, we need to understand the security aspect that is being rightly pointed out. So, security of Bitcoin comes from Bitcoin blockchain. And where the security coming is from the consensus mechanism, like Sybil resistant mechanism. So there are concepts like proof of work and proof of stake. So proof of work is basically a suitable kind of concept for hard money, like miners need to run those kind of, mining rigs to produce those kind of hashes to secure the network. And on the other hand, on the proof of stake, you need to stake your coin on blockchain to secure the blockchain. So you have some form of security inbuilt within the protocol itself. When it comes to CBDCs or maybe sovereign money, you are relying on who are the party behind those issuance. So in case of CBDCs, in both like wholesale and retail, you have a sovereign money kind of concept which is backed by the Reserve Bank of that particular country. And the issue lies is that we have seen in the past, like Argentinian government, Venezuela, or many other governments, they have been bankrupt in the past. So now the issue relies on, if you can rely on central banks, now there is a dual argument. Like, is central bank is 100% secure? The past suggests that it's not true. But in the case of hard money like gold, and Bitcoin and those kind of things, you need to think from the perspective of what are the uses behind those cryptocurrencies. Because right now I have clearly said that the dollar derives its value from the entire three spectrum of things that I have said earlier. But from the Bitcoin perspective, if people started using those kind of currencies via transacting in decentralized finance, or maybe having those kind of lending or borrowing protocol in decentralized finance, that's where the derivation of value comes for those digital currency like Bitcoin, Monero, and other kind of form.
Maybe we'll have some time for the audience to give some question, but just taking a cue from what you just last spoke, maybe a small thought from Adhikar, if you could just come in while he spoke about dollar, but with digital currencies is the consideration of dollar is not something that's expected to continue, or the dominance of it, or do you see there's room for an alternative to dollar? It may be a currency, it may be in different forms.
Yeah. No, I think really interesting question Uday, because there's this whole concept and a lot of countries, right, some of the major economies such as China, they are actually looking at sort of moving away from the whole USD payment settlements, right, because they want potentially, I believe China can never have renminbi as their currency as a potential international trade settlement, but they are pushing for it. So I personally believe dollar will lose its dominance over time because it was the holy grail of global currencies. Not so today. You have India who's started trade settlements in rupee, right? If recently the government has started, and there's a lot of encouraging news from that front, because a lot of countries, especially in the Middle East and some of our neighboring countries, have started adopting that approach, which means I think almost all countries today do want to move away from a USD base. Yes, USD does work when it comes to, let's say, having a common currency in the world. That's what a lot of people want. Having said that, it's not the future, right? It's definitely not the future. And with the advent of a lot of these, digital currencies coming to the picture, there's definitely scope for other currencies. Again, my personal belief is you'll probably move to a system where it'll end up being arrangements between major economies in terms of what currencies you want to settle in, and then take it from there. So I would say, yeah, we are moving to a more globalized yet deglobalized economy where you're seeing more trade, but not the way it used to be. Yeah.
Right. I guess we would like to have a little more time to have this discussion. I'm sure all the panelists will have some perspective. Maybe it's time for you, the ones who are clapping, to ask some questions to this esteemed panel, and maybe we can then conclude the overall discussion with Sharad and Akash with some closing thoughts. Maybe first to the audience, and then maybe the two of you can give some closing thoughts. Audience, any questions? Right. Ask Akash, what's Bitcoin to buy? Right. If that's a question to ask. Which one will go up?
Oh, good morning. In the start, Mr. Uday had asked who carries cash, and I think 95% of the audience did raise their hands. Now, basically, the reason we resort to cash is because we do not get network in our campus to carry out this digital transaction, right? So we can see it's going to be a huge structural reform going into cashless economy. Now, if you look globally, UK is going through recession, Europe is facing through energy crisis, and US is going to go into recession in 2023. So economists believe that India is also going to face this recession, and it's going to be a global recession across the world. Now, what is your perspective? What is your understanding? How would it impact if there's a structural reform based on cashless economy in India during this global recession?
So, any specific panel member that you have?
Actually, I would like to hear both sides, a person who's pro cashless and who's against cashless economy.
Right, maybe we can start with Sharad, if you want to take up that question.
So it is true that in 2008, a lot of the population in India did not suffer the consequences of the global financial crisis because there was a parallel economy, and it was much, much larger than it is right now. So there was a parallel economy which functioned only on cash, which was outside the tax net, and consequently they were not so badly hit by the global financial crisis. But So that might be a very, very short-term, very narrow perspective to look at it at, but over the long term and looking at the country's larger perspective, having a cash-based economy which functions on the sidelines of the economy and does not contribute to the tax revenue and does not form part of the tax base is not good for the country. So I would say that, yeah, what you're saying is actually right. When you have a large cash economy, they are sort of insulated from what happens to the rest of the world, which is what happened in 2008. But over the long term and from a wider perspective, it's not good for the country. It's better to sink and swim with the with the rest of the country and paying your taxes on time and in the right manner. Yeah.
Right. All right, so nice question, first of all. So that makes sense to me. So first thing is we are already in recession right now. The global recession has already been kicked in 2022. You have seen multiple layoffs, the interest rate highs, or maybe, this kind of monetary stimulus has been stopped across the nation. But the real concept lies cash is the king. You cannot deny this concept because cash can give you this kind of privacy and also your anonymity kind of transaction facilitation where you can do the transaction without anybody knowing that you are doing those transactions. And that has a benefit. But here is the counter argument. Money as a form of, a digital payment has some kind of, form of issuance in the form of, cash, but the electronic form is much more dominant in terms of you have different kind of technology like offline payments. Like without connecting to internet, how you can do transaction between multiple parties. But the counter argument of that particular point lies on one point, which is the financial literacy. If you are not giving those kind of, let's say if you are right now in Ghana or maybe Nigeria or maybe Venezuela, just imagine that you have, a huge rack of money and you are buying pizza. Does that make sense in terms of, 21st century? I don't think so. So for that, you need to adopt, as a form of technology, like how you can do the transaction. So cash is good, but you have different technology to counter those points, meaning offline payment system. So how you can do transaction without knowing anybody that you have done those transactions via instant payment without connecting to internet. So that technology lies right now because it's just technology. What do you mean by tool? I just want to conclude this argument. So there is a recent study has been done in 2018 that has said that in terms of efficiency of any animal or human, who comes on top? So horse basically comes on top when you basically feed some kind of energy to those animals, like human being as an animal. And human basically comes to last. So example, if you give some kind of monetary or maybe those form of money to some animals like food or those kind of stuff, the energy doesn't last long. But when you compare a tool, like if you give human a bicycle and then feed that particular human and then horse, the energy of that bicycle lasts longer than other form of animal. So that's a technological aspect. If we as a human don't, adopt as per the current circumstances, then I don't think so, if we can preserve a different form of this, entire recession and those kind of concepts. So I think the conclusion point is cash is a king. Indian context lies behind because of financial literacy and privacy kind of thing. But the counter argument would be we need to evolve somehow. So for evolution, you need to rely on some kind of technical tools like offline payment system and those kind of stuff. Hope that makes sense.
Right. Interesting. I think we have time for one more question from the audience. Maybe we can go to this side.
Sure.
Okay, sorry.
Hi, I'm Nikun. My question is, when the RBI issues a digital currency, it directly affects their balance sheet, just like the cash of any denomination they issue, right? But here's the ambiguity. Who is bearing the interest of that currency? Because now when you issue a currency, that's the RBI digital currency, you have to create like 1 billion plus wallets for every citizen to transact in, right? So when you create a wallet, it creates ambiguity for the people who are using it because it doesn't bear interest. And even if it does bear interest, you'll end up creating a currency that has interest, it has interest. So the whole economy works in a place where there's opportunity cost for money. So when you issue a digital currency and it stays in the wallet of a Indian citizen, he'll have to park it in a bank's digital account to bear interest, because he just can't leave a lakh rupees in his RBI wallet with no interest bearing on it. And if he just deposits the same amount in the digital bank account, he'll get the interest. But that is what exactly we are doing now. And what we're basically doing is, there's no paper currency, so to say. So, but who will bear the interest is my question. And I feel there's a good application to the lower rung of societies where subsidies are like financed through e-rupee, which is already being done as a pilot project. And we also have a mechanism of payment banks that has a 1 lakh rupee limit, a 2 lakh rupee limit. So we already have the mechanism. And my question is, who's bearing the interest?
Who's bearing the interest?
So I think this is a very logical point, so thanks for asking this question. So as I said earlier, there are two forms of CBDCs. First is retail CBDCs and wholesale CBDCs. So in retail context, you are saying that a central bank need to issue different wallet to the user. That's not a concept. So you have a two-tier kind of mechanism. So commercial banks will issue wallet to its user. So let's say if you have an account in SDFC, so SDFC will do some kind of technological, like wallet creation for you, and then they will issue those wallet. But the sovereignty of that particular currency that you are holding in that particular wallet lies with central banks, because it's sovereign money issued by central bank. On wholesale side, it's just, user will not interact with any currency if that's come into fruition, because if you have seen the research study from BIS, Bank of International Settlements, or IMF, you will see that 90% of central banks are much more interested in pilots of the CBDC. And majority of them are basically emphasizes on wholesale part rather than retail part. Because as you have said correctly, retail part is already existing right now in the market in the form of different real-time payments, IMPS and UPI as well. Because there is a different kind of point of view, like if the country itself is digitalized, then why we need CBDC? CBDC is needed because of various kind of technology underneath. So CBDC is a form of two type, like CBDC can be issued on two platforms, DLT platform and non-DLT platform, and both have a different trade-off if you are choosing as a central bank. But from the perspective of your wallet, I don't think so. Central bank will issue those wallets to the consumers. Commercial bank will issue those wallets if that concept lies on retail side of CBDCs. Hope that makes sense.
A country of 1.4 billion plus population, as per the recent study, it says about 80% of the adult population has bank accounts. But many as a percentage is still non-operative in the sense there are no transactions in these bank accounts. While financial literacy as an inclusion is a concept that the RBI brings to the table with three parameters: access, availability of financial services, which includes digital payments. But I'm sure that the panelists were trying their level best to break down some of those very hardcore nuances. I hope you enjoyed it and was insightful as much as I did. Thank you very much, all of you. Thank you.
to shine light upon the future plans of the chapter in the coming semester. And interactive activities to provide clarity to students on different career plans and higher education avenues available to them, along with how to pursue such avenues in terms of funding and how to enroll in colleges and organization. Gratitude makes sense of our past, being peace to our present and a vision for tomorrow. On behalf of IMA CRI Student Chapter, I, Natakta Sahu, stand before you to propose the vote of thanks to all those who have contributed to the successful panel discussion. Firstly, I would like to extend my deepest appreciation to our 5 panelists for today, C.A. Pralad R., Mr. Sharad Kapoor, Mr. Mustafa Bedwal, Mr. Adhikar Naidu, and Mr. Akash, for taking time out of their busy schedules and sharing word of insight with the student. I would also like to extend my heartfelt thanks to the moderator of the day, Mr. Uday Keti, for gracing the occasion and moderating the panel discussion. I thank IMA Bangalore chapter for guiding our initiatives and providing us with all the support and the requirements. I take this opportunity to thank the management of Christ, deemed to be university, for granting us this wonderful opportunity to conduct the panel discussion. I thank Dr. Tomy Kallarakkal, Dean, School of Commerce, Finance and Accountancy, Dr. Biju Toms, Director, School of Finance, Commerce and Accountancy, Dr. Karthigai Prakasam, Head, Department of Commerce, for the constant support and guidance in our initiative. I would like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to the faculty coordinator of the student chapter, Dr. Lakshmi B., Program Coordinator, BCom Strategic Finance Honors, and Dr. Sunil MP, Academic Coordinator, BCom Strategic Finance Honors, for all the support and the motivation. And it would give me immense pleasure to thank my student chapter and all the volunteers for today for their dedication and commitment. It is because of your efforts that we have been able to conduct the panel discussion successfully today. Last but not the least, I thank all the Christites for being such a wonderful audience. Thank you again and have a great weekend.